good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to everybody who's joining in for the Hydrogen Hour at Transport and Climate Change Week 2021. I'm very happy to welcome you all to the session, and I see that we have a great interest also of joiners who joined the session today, and the interest of green hydrogen is increasing every year. Today, I am very proud to also co-host the session together with the Women in Green Hydrogen Network and the PtX Hub. You can find more information about both great initiatives online, hopefully in the chat quite soon. As I said, I see a lot of interest in the green hydrogen topic currently, and this is why I'm very happy also that we have, even today on the Transport Week, a lot of joiners who are interested in the session. We organized a program for all of you that will focus and give you the fundamentals on the whole green value chain, green hydrogen value chain, and the Power-to-X topic. So today we will lay the fundamentals of green hydrogen and Power-to-X. So we will focus on the question on why is Power-to-X important for climate change, and then also we will focus on where in transport does it make sense to apply Power-to-X and synthetic fuels. Tomorrow, we will go into more detail for the sustainability criteria that are needed in the production process of Power-to-X and synthetic fuels. And then on Thursday, we have a deep dive session on synthetic fuels for aviation and shipping, and we will learn from some experiences internationally. So I'm very, very happy that you all joined today. If you have questions during the presentations that you will listen to shortly, just put them in the chat, and we have reserved some minutes in the end to answer the most pressing ones. But now, without further ado, I will welcome the first speaker. Our first speaker is Gonzalo Munoz. Gonzalo Munoz is the high-level climate champion of the COP25. So he's from Chile, and he's organizing together with his team, the COP25, but also the COP26 in Glasgow this year. He has a great experience in climate action, and he has also co-founded and led the company Tricyclus that is active all over Latin America and is highly recognized here. So as you can see, he is a very experienced expert, and I'm very interested to learn from him why does he see the importance of Power-to-X and transport from a climate perspective. So please, Gonzalo, start your presentation.
Hello, my name is Gonzalo Munoz, high-level champion for COP25. And first, I would like to thank and congratulate GIZ and the German Ministry of the Environment, and happy to be here also with ministers on energy and transport and authorities of different sectors. We know we're all searching for those 1.5 degrees of maximum increase of the global temperature. In order to get there, we definitely need to reach a net zero and resilient world by 2050, the latest. That is absolutely mandatory for all of us. In that sense, with Nigel Topping, my friend and champion colleague from the UK, we have set these campaigns of running towards the race to zero and the race to resilience. And when it comes to racing toward the zero emissions, that means not only reducing the emissions, but also, of course, increasing the capacity to capture and sequester that emissions that we have already done. In that sense, what we're talking about is decarbonizing the global economy. We know we need to reduce our emissions drastically, and starting in this decisive decade, while reducing 50% at least, right? That means that we will require clean green electricity to continue ramping up all around the world. That's what Race to Zero is about in terms of reducing the emissions. But at the same time, we know that electrifying the grid and electrifying the energy sector all around the world is not necessarily capable of reducing the emissions in all of the sectors. We know that there are some hard-to-abate sectors that we've been speaking about for a long time, meaning shipping, trucking, aviation, steel, cement. For all of those sectors, we need a different solution that cannot only be electrifying part of it. In that sense, green hydrogen, we know, can play such a critical role in mitigating the emissions from transport sectors that represented in 2018 about 3 gigatons of CO2 emissions, and that should allow us to work towards the net zero by 2050. Green hydrogen definitely is something that we're taking extremely serious, and as a Chilean high-level champion, we are supporting and promoting it as one of the sectors that should allow a country like Chile not only to decarbonize its economy, but also become a relevant player in this case, by exporting its green hydrogen, supporting the decarbonization of the whole world, because it has the advantage that it can decarbonize end uses that are challenging to just electrify with renewable power. Given, of course, green hydrogen's high energy density and convertibility and transportability. Due to the efficiency losses involved in converting electricity to hydrogen, to derivatives like ammonia and methanol, and sometimes back to electricity, it should not be seen as a solution where electricity can support decarbonization directly, like light-duty transport. We feel like particular sectors like long-haul shipping, heavy-duty trucking, and intercontinental aviation, in those sectors, green hydrogen can meet energy needs given its unique attributes, and therefore, as high-level champions, but also as Chilean member of the green hydrogen strategy, we are positioning on setting the conditions for specifically part of those sectors, and also, let's say, the combination between the trucking sector with the mining sector, for example. So where demand for these logistic solutions are highest due to rapid economic and population and emission growth, in particular, of course, developing countries, international efforts should focus on diverting that demand to green hydrogen and offer supporting funding policy best practices to scale up these alternative solutions. This leapfrog can play an essential role in preventing stranded infrastructure and technologies from today onward. So ambition and progress in these sectors is building. We have this coalition of large energy and transport companies that aim to deploy 100,000 fuel cell trucks across Europe by 2030. The Getting to Zero coalition of ship and infrastructure providers is collaborating to achieve commercialized zero emission shipping by 2030. Specific companies like Airbus, Anglo American, and Hyson are actively developing and beginning to scale end-use technologies capable of using green hydrogen. All of these efforts make us increasingly confident that we are at the beginning of exponential growth curves in both supply and demand for green hydrogen by 2050 to realize its full potential in support of net zero by 2050. This is validated further by the Green Hydrogen Catapult initiative that in the role of the high-level champions, we proudly launched during 2020 by 7 leading companies to deploy 25 gigawatts of green hydrogen electrolyzers by 2026, a sign of confidence in the supply-based ability to scale up and reduce costs in the short term. On the other hand, going back to my Chilean role, we're determined to be part as a country of not only the Green Hydrogen Catapult, but be capable of setting the conditions for helping those 25 gigawatts to be really deployed in this first half of the decade, while providing the conditions for some of the big players to develop part of those programs in Chile, and in that sense, working very close to GIZ, with whom we have been collaborating for so long, and we're very thankful for that support. We want Chile to be one of the sectors in which the possibility of the green hydrogen to really become competitive towards the fossil fuels can be a reality in the next 5 years while reaching a cost lower than $2 per kilo. We're looking forward for that to become a reality, and again, thanking PtX and GIZ for its support. Really looking forward to continue the collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gonzalo. This was a very insightful and interesting input already to the topic of green hydrogen and Power-to-X. I think we already learned some very important and crucial factors that in regards to Power-to-X and green hydrogen. For example, the potential of leapfrogging for developing and emerging economies, but also the question, where in transport does it make sense to use hydrogen and Power-to-X? We will focus on those topics in the upcoming presentations also. But first, I want to introduce my dear colleague, Heino von Meyer. Heino von Meyer, I asked him to present a bit like Power-to-X, how does it actually work? What is the focus? What are the steps that are necessary to create synthetic fuels and feedstock from renewable electricity? So, as I said, Heino von Meyer is a colleague of mine. He also works at the International PtX Hub, and there he leads he's the head of global relations and international cooperation. So he is a very experienced expert also in the international cooperation topic, as he has been working for 3 decades already at the OECD, the Organization of Economic Development and Cooperation. So very excited to introduce you to Heino von Meyer now, and I'm hoping we learned a lot. If you still have questions after this presentation, as I said, just post them into the chat.
The invitation to address the first hydrogen hour of the Transport and Climate Change Week 2021. I would like to start with a quote. Yes, my friends, I believe that water will one day be used as fuel. This 150-year-old quote stems from The Mysterious Island, a novel written in 1874 by the French poet and writer Jules Verne. Jules Verne is often called the father of science fiction. Yet, this is not science fiction. Today, his vision has become reality. I was given 8 minutes to show you how we can even get international airplanes flying with water, plus electricity from wind and solar, thereby significantly reducing the climate footprint of aviation. Now, let me share my presentation. And here we go. This is how it works. The solution is PtX, Power-to-X, where the X stands for Sustainable Fossil-Free Fuels and Feedstocks. You could also say S for F. And the trick is to convert green electrons into green molecules. Molecules that can then further be processed into other products currently produced using fossil sources such as coal, oil, or gas. For example, with Power-to-X, we can produce synthetic e-kerosene with the same characteristics as conventional jet fuel, except with a carbon footprint close to 0. And we only need water, we need wind and sun to produce electricity, and we need air, or at least the CO2 content. From that, we can produce PTL, power to liquid, a product from which you can produce synthetic e-kerosene. Now let's look at this more closely, step by step. It all starts with electricity from renewable sources, wind and solar power, and eventually also geothermal or hydropower. Now we come back to water, H2O. With electricity, one can split water into its two components, H2, hydrogen, and O2, oxygen. And this process is called electrolysis, and it is performed in so-called electrolyzers. Since our electricity was green, renewable, our output can also be labeled green hydrogen. Currently, hydrogen is already used in industry sectors such as steel and chemicals, yet it's produced from fossil sources and such as coal or gas, and thus it is called gray hydrogen, and it contributes massively to the industry's carbon footprint. So we will have to reduce or even finally replace it. And in the current debate about hydrogen, which you could even call a hydrogen hype, H2 hydrogen is often wrongly called the new oil and seen as the silver bullet for decarbonizing not only industry, but also the transport sector. Projects are promoting the direct use of hydrogen in fuel cells, propelling trains, ferries, trucks, and even cars. However, H2 hydrogen is only one X among the many PtX solutions. It is not the end of the story, and we should think beyond hydrogen. And we should walk the extra mile along the PTL or PtX supply chain, value chain. Like this, we can tap the full potential of the many hydrogen-derived PtX products meeting the specific needs of different transport and industry sectors. For example, in a next synthesis process, a so-called Fischer-Tropsch FT synthesis, hydrogen, H2, is combined with CO2, carbon dioxide, and we can produce a synthetic crude like crude oil, which can further be refined into all kinds of power to liquid e-fuels. For example, FT synthesis can produce e-kerosene that is certifiable for blending with conventional jet fuel, and in the long term, actually replacing the fossil parts. Like aviation, also maritime shipping is another transport sector which so far cannot be easily defossilized by using renewable electricity or batteries. With Fischer-Tropsch synthesis, container vessels or even cruise ships can get fossil-free marine diesel. Alternatively, in another synthesis process, not Fischer-Tropsch, but Haber-Bosch, which is combining hydrogen, H2, with N2, nitrogen, a power-to-gas or PTG product can be produced, such as ammonia, NH3 for those who like chemistry. It is used as a basic input in nitrogen fertilizer production. And in liquefied form, it also qualifies as a shipping fuel. Finally, there are many more options for hydrogen-derived fossil-free PtX feedstocks, in particular as inputs in the chemical industry and also others. So I would love to go on to discuss the broader environmental and social sustainability concerns related to hydrogen and PtX. However, time is over and I will stop my presentation here. And the topic of my impulse statement was PtX, how does it work? I hope you now have a basic understanding of PtX technology. However, to really organize and advance energy transformation with a breakthrough towards green hydrogen and PtX, it needs more than just technology. This is not just a transition. It becomes, and it must become, a just transition, taking on board social and societal dimensions. Strong economic and financial incentives are also required to boost, on the one hand, investment on the supply side and to provide incentives on the demand side. Both rely on clarity and predictability of the regulatory framework. Sustainability standards and internationally agreed certification schemes will be essential elements for such a framework. Their design, implementation, monitoring and enforcement is still a major challenge. And the International PtX Hub Berlin is part of this global effort. If you want to hear more about PtX sustainability, join us tomorrow for the next Hydrogen Hour. But today, I have to stop. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Heino. That was very interesting, a very insightful and very detailed explanation on how Power-to-X works. I think this really gives us great fundamentals for the upcoming presentations also on the topic of Power-to-X and green hydrogen. I also saw that there are the first questions in the chat about the economics, so very important questions. I hope we will have the time to discuss it at the end of this session. But first, let us introduce the next speaker. The next speaker is JEkaterina Boening. JEkaterina works at Transport and Environment. They are a leading think tank that is working on transport-related issues and the environment. And there she is focusing on the German activities of this organization. And her main work is also on green hydrogen. Before she joined Transport and Environment, she was working for BDI, so the industry association here in Germany, where she also focused her work on hydrogen activities together with the companies that are in the association. So she's a key expert also in the German scene of green hydrogen and also a co-founder of the Women in Green Hydrogen Network. So I heartily welcome you, JEkaterina Boening, with your presentation on where in transport does it actually make sense to use Power-to-X and green hydrogen. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is JEkaterina Boening and I work for Transport and Environment. I'm very happy to share with you my views on Power-to-X in transport today. For this, I will share my presentation, and in my presentation, I will focus on sustainability requirements for Power-to-X products. So most of you are probably familiar with the production process of renewable hydrocarbons or e-fuels. There are so many names. This is a very complex process with several steps, and at each step we are losing energy. So first, in the process of electrolyzer, when producing green hydrogen with renewable electricity, then we need CO2, and this is either from industrial point sources, or we need to capture CO2 from the air. And then last but not least, we also need energy when synthesizing this product. So it is a complex process, and as a result of all the conversion steps, we lose lots of energy, and we require 2 to 14 times more electricity as compared to direct electrification. Nevertheless, Power-to-X products will be very important for achieving climate neutrality in the transport sector, but we need to get it right from the start so that we get sustainable products. And the key sustainability criteria for renewable hydrocarbons are the electricity source and the CO2 source. So talking about the electricity source, it is very important, of course, that we use renewable energy, but in addition to this, we talk here about the additionality of renewable energy plants. Why additionality? Well, the reason is simple. There is not a single country in the world which would cover its energy demand with renewable energy only. It is always a mix of renewable and fossil energy. And so if the electricity demand rises, as it is the case when we run electrolyzers, but the renewable energy supply stays constant, then we have an increase in the use of fossil energy, and this leads to an overall increase of the CO2 intensity of the power mix. That's why we need additional renewable energy plants for the production of Power-to-X products, and additional here means that these plants are new and they are unsupported, so not receiving governmental subsidies. Very often observers say, but well, why additionality is not required for e-mobility? And the reason lies in the life cycle greenhouse gas emissions, which are depicted on this slide. So the horizontal lines you see here are the fossil fuels. These are the greenhouse gas emissions of the fossil fuels. And the purple lines, these are the e-fuels with direct air capture and e-fuels with CO2 from industrial sources. And as you can see here, with the current power mix of Germany, e-fuels emit 3 to 4 times more CO2 as compared to fossil fuels. And only with renewable shares of over 90%, we can achieve a positive climate impact with e-fuels. But in contrast to this, if we look at e-mobility, which is this yellow line here, then already with the current power mix of Germany, we see a positive climate impact. The criteria of additionality is also very important when we talk about the potential imports of Power-to-X products from other countries. Here you see the energy mix of the countries which are often called as the potential exporters of Power-to-X products. And as you can clearly see, they still base their energy supply mostly on fossil fuels. And of course, the production of e-fuels and hydrogen for export should not come at cost of decarbonizing the domestic energy systems. And this is why it is so important that if at some point we will have an international certification system for Power-to-X products, we define additionality very, very clearly in such a framework. The next criteria I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation is the CO2 source. So here we have basically two options. We can source CO2 from industrial point sources or direct air capture. And whereas industrial point sources seem feasible at the moment, as we have lots of industry emitting CO2, such as, for example, the steel, the cement industry, it is obviously only something we can use in the transition phase, because when we take CO2 from an industrial plant, we are only halving the emissions, but we are not avoiding them completely. That's why in the long term, we will need to scale up direct air capture technology. At the moment, there are only 15 plants operating worldwide, but we will require regulatory incentives to scale up these plants, and these incentives can be, for example, some binding, gradually increasing GAC shares in e-fuels production. So all in all, as you've just seen, the sustainability criteria for PowerTX products is very complex, and it is difficult to achieve these requirements in the current energy system, which is still mostly based on e-fuels, especially in the countries which are often considered to be the future exporting countries of PowerTX products. This is why the industries, the sectors where direct electrification is possible, do electrify and do not go for e-fuels. This is the reason why e-fuels and PowerTX products do not represent a feasible solution for the road transport. And this has been recognized by the market, with Volkswagen investing 70 billion euros in e-mobility, but also Daimler, Volvo, Ford, all going into electric mobility, because also they realize how difficult it is to adhere to these sustainability requirements in the current energy system. But there will be also applications where direct electrification is not possible, and these are the aviation and the shipping sector. Here, PowerTX products will be crucial for reaching climate neutrality, and that's why we need to take action now. Recently, a very important milestone has been reached in Germany, with a 2% mandate for synthetic kerosene being implemented for the year 2030. In the next step, we will need to work on expanding the geographical scope of such a mandate to the EU level, for example, in the Refuel EU Aviation Regulation, and then in the next step, of course, also internationally. From the mid-2030s, we can also see some zero-emission aircrafts fueled with hydrogen directly, which will be, of course, a more efficient option in comparison to synthetic kerosene. But here we will need to see whether the vision presented by Airbus will come true. In shipping, we as TNE consider ammonia to represent the most promising option, as with ammonia, we do not have the issue of the CO2 source, and the synthesis process as a whole is very efficient. Decarbonizing the European aviation and shipping sector will be a huge challenge. So to switch aviation and shipping from fossil fuels today to PowerTX products, we will require 1,275 terawatt hours of renewable electricity. So this is a huge challenge, and here I think that Europe will need to cooperate with other regions, that we will need international collaboration, because also considering the requirements, energy requirements of other sectors, it will be difficult to produce all these PowerTX products only in the European Union. And that's why it is very important that we consider the sustainability criteria from the very beginning in our discussions on PowerTX products in such conferences like it is today. So sustainability certification of PowerTX products will need to play a central role in scaling up the PowerTX production globally. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, JEkaterina, for this great presentation of yours. Thank you so much. You already mentioned very, very important topics when it comes to sustainability criteria of PowerTX and green hydrogen. One, of course, is direct air capture and additionality, you also mentioned. And then we also have the focus on direct electrification in the transport sector. So I think those topics will also be discussed in tomorrow's session. But I also saw there are some follow-up questions also on the topic of sustainability, for example, the issue of water, but also more questions about costs. So I would invite you both, JEkaterina and Heino. I know you should be, you're there. Hi, very great to see you. Nice to see you. Thank you again for the great presentations, and it was amazing to learn from you about the process of PtX, but also about the sustainability criteria. I learned a lot. And we already have some questions in the chat, so I would like to ask you both some questions. I think the first one, because it's really well connected to the sustainability issue that we were talking about, I think both of you can answer. Maybe I directly target it to JEkaterina about the issue of water. So we have the question that is there enough water supply to make it sustainable in the long term? Is using salted water an option?
Well, thank you very much for this question. And once again, thanks a lot for inviting me to this conference. I'm very grateful to be able to share my views with you today. So in regards to water, it is not possible to use salted water in the process of electrolyzer. There will need to be desalination plants in order to make the seawater usable for the process of electrolyzers. And then, of course, the desalination plants will also require renewable energy. So it makes sense that if we produce hydrogen in places like Saudi Arabia, for example, in Morocco, and then if we take water from the sea, that we then also use the same renewable power plants which we use to power the electrolyzers, so that we also use them to power this desalination plants, in order to keep in mind that the entire value chain, so the entire production chain of PtX products, needs to be sustainable.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this answer. Heino, do you want, I see you want to add something on this point. You go ahead.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's really exciting to discuss with you, and I was extremely pleased that JEkaterina actually addressed those topics which I couldn't present because of shortage of time. On water, she addressed the environmental ecological dimension. Yes, we have to be cautious with the brine that comes from desalination. However, once we go for desalination, there is a social dimension, and therefore we should ensure that the desalinated water doesn't just go into the hydrogen and PtX production, but that the local communities and the farming sector is also benefiting. And I think we need those combinations of environmental, social, and even governance issues whenever we discuss the sustainability dimension.
Yeah, thank you for this great addition, also looking at it from a social perspective. We have many questions, or some questions at least, on a topic that of course is interesting to everybody. It's about cost and economics. So maybe I read out two of the questions that I see here in the chat. One is, how affordable is hydrogen tech for public transportation industry? So really targeting, of course, our transport sector today. And the other one, is the production of kerosene more economically viable compared to the production of conventional kerosene, so synthetic versus conventional one? Are there any return on investment studies? So I think they both go together. Please raise your hand if you want to take it on. I think it's always difficult to discuss costs, but also very important, of course, for decision makers. JEkaterina, please go ahead.
Thank you. Well, as you just said, it is very difficult to discuss costs because also the companies don't want to disclose their cost structures. But from the discussions we had with some potential suppliers of synthetic kerosene, for example, we know that the costs are going to drop. So some producers even talk about 2 to 3 euros per liter of kerosene. So this is already kind of viable, especially if we give this product a premium. So if we, for example, allow for accounting the use of synthetic kerosene on certain targets, or maybe benefiting the airlines which use synthetic kerosene within the European ETS, so the emission trading system. So there are ways of really, accounting for this premium. And then I think as we go with the market ramp up of the production, as there are more and more plants across Europe and then also worldwide, we will also we will bring the cost down.
Yes, maybe before I lead over to Heino, I can also say that the PtX Hub actually offers some trainings also, and there a very important part of this is also the economics. So if you're really interested in learning more about this, you can also reach out to us via our website, and there we have some more information and insights, but maybe also Heino can answer quickly on this cost issue.
Well, like JEkaterina said, we can hope for massive cost degressions. We've seen this in the photovoltaic sector, where prices really dropped from $4 to 40 cents in a period of less than a decade. With electrolyzers, there is huge potential also for serial production. So we need to get the prices down thanks to technology, but also, as she said, the governments will have to play their part. That is about taxation, that is about blending mandates. And finally, the consumer can also play a role here and go for the green product. And it's not just airplanes. I mean, it's cruise ships, etc. I think at some point people will be conscious to make sure that their travel is becoming carbon-free.
Thank you so much also for this edition. I see we're coming to the end. I saw there are also questions on trains, for example, also on aviation. I would really like to ask you to join tomorrow and the day after tomorrow again, because there we do the very deep dive sessions on the different transport options for Power-to-X and green hydrogen and applications. But I think 2 questions are still very relevant to be asked today. And this is about the different countries. We have many different conditions in the different countries that could produce green hydrogen. And the question here is, what are the differences between them, and is also transport actually an option, because it's quite cost intensive. So I see Heino smile. Maybe you want to go first on this one?
Well, I think the most important message from the PtX Hub should be the hydrogen debate is very much currently in a logic, how can Germany best get access for hydrogen because of its huge needs in the domestic market. Our logic is, how can this technology, PtX, help develop in a sustainable way those countries where the production takes place? It is impossible that with renewable hydrogen, with renewable energy, we produce maybe in Africa the hydrogen for Europe, while a lot of people are still not connected to electricity or are dependent on fossil fuel. We need to have a clear perspective how the countries can themselves benefit. And if then there is export, fine, if it generates revenues. So we need to have a country-specific perspective, and some countries may go for hydrogen, others may use it as ammonia in the fertilizer production. So let's be specific and identify what's best for the countries. And then we need international cooperation on regulatory frameworks, on the certification, etc.
Yes, thank you. This already sounded like a final word, I have to say. It's very, very strong statement here. Local value creation versus transport and exporting. So I think it's a very important addition also to the current discussions we have here in Germany and Europe. But JEkaterina, do you still want to add on this, or do you share this view?
Well, I completely share the view Heino just presented, and just one small addition. And exactly because we need to consider the needs of the potential exporters, we also need to get our homework done in Europe. So we need to exploit the potential for PowerTX production in Europe, in the north and the south. And only then we, at least in parallel, we can talk about imports, but we should not forget about the potentials we have on the European continent.
Yes, also look into the potentials we have already, maybe in the south of Spain or the north of Norway or Sweden. Very, very interesting discussion. It was always a pleasure to talk to you. I could continue talking to you for another hour, discussing and exchanging on hydrogen topics. But unfortunately, we are running out of time. Thank you all. Thank you especially to Heino and JEkaterina for joining today. You will see more of Heino tomorrow, and you will also see more of JEkaterina on many conferences that will come in the future, because she's a very experienced speaker also on conferences. I'm thanking all of you also for joining in. For the European listeners, maybe also at a quite late time of the day. Latin America is only starting, so very exciting discussions ahead also on the transport topics in Latin America. So I'm very excited to keep online for a bit longer at the Transport and Climate Change Week. If you still have some time, or if you're still interested, please reach out to the PtX Hub on the website. And also, if you may be women working in green hydrogen, you're very invited to join the Women in Green Hydrogen Network, but also everybody else who wants to listen to very interesting events that are scheduled from the Women in Green Hydrogen team. Welcome to join. Just check out our websites. And great to talk to you. And I'm looking forward to the sessions that are upcoming.